to Introduction to Aerodynamic Objects Tutorial 1, Welcome to Wind. And in this tutorial we're going to make some flow and understand how to visualize it. Our objectives are firstly to create a wind model using a uniform flow component and then understand how we can adjust flow speed and direction. Then we're going to use a variety of visualization tools to visualize what the flow is doing. Next we're going to add some turbulence and understand how to adjust the turbulence properties. And finally, for some fun, we're going to use a Streakline to do some writing in smoke. So this is what the scene diagram looks like for the project we're going to make. At the top here we have got our uniform flow, and this is a type of flow primitive in aerodynamic objects, and we can vary wind speed and turbulence. And then as children objects of this in this setup, we have got some visualization components. So we've got our field arrows, streak lines, path lines and particles, and we have these packaged up in a prefab. So in terms of doing this tutorial, you can just drag the prefab straight into your project, but I'll also show you how you can create these individually without using a prefab. So here we are in Unity. I am using Unity 2022. This should be similar if you're using a later version of Unity. I'm using the default window layout in Unity, so it's the hierarchy window on the left, inspector on the right, and then we've got our project and console windows at the bottom here. For the this first tutorial, we're doing everything in the scene view, so we're not using the game view to start off with. So actually I've got the game view as play unfocused, so we're staying in the scene view when we're running it. If you've done tutorial 0 and you've set up the project okay, you should see an assets folder with AO, aerodynamic objects, with 3 subfolders: demos, resources and scripts. And we can see all the prefabs in the project by clicking on this all prefabs option up here. Okay, so let's build our flow field world number 1. First thing we're going to do actually is add in, it's kind of a prop, but this guy, if we drag in the Aeroman figure, and this little guy features in all the tutorials pretty much, and he's there because it's really useful to have some scale in a aerodynamic or fluid world where you can't really see how big things are. This person is about 6 foot tall and gives us a good sense of scale for all the models we're building. The other thing which is really useful about person in there is it gives a sense of which way the direction up and forward is. And in aerodynamics objects, we use the kind of standard Unity convention that Z, so the blue arrow forwards, is positive, green Y up is positive, and X to the right, red arrow, is positive. So this little Aeroman guy, when by default when you drop him in, he's facing forwards, and his left hand is raised in the air. Okay, that's Aeroman in. So now let's get our flow field prefab. So if we look along in our prefabs, we can see here a prefab called flow field, and we drag that in. And if we expand it, we can see there are flow visualization tools which you saw on the scene diagram, but they're disabled at the moment, but our flow field item is there enabled. And if we look across in Inspector, we can see we've got a script called uniform flow, and it gives us the option of varying speed, azimuth and so on in there. So that was the prefab method of getting aerodynamic object components into your scene, but just to quickly show you some other ways of doing it, you can just do create empty and then go to add component, and it's already got there uniform flow. So I've added a uniform flow primitive that way. I can access the create menu by right click, going down to aerodynamic objects, and I can do flow primitives uniform flow, and that's in there. Equally, if I want to get a flow visualization tool up just as in a different way, if I go up to game object, it's the same menu just by a different route. Then I'm looking in flow visualization, so if I want my field arrows I can click on that and there they are created. So various different ways of getting in. In this tutorial we're just going to use our prefab version because that's a bit easier. Before we get on to doing play, let's have a look at what we can tell before we even press play. If you look very closely in there, you can see a little blue arrow, and I guess you need to check you've got your gizmos on. But if we put gizmos on, so the little gizmo for this uniform flow is an arrow like that. And by default in aerodynamic objects worlds, a flow is in your face as such. So if we put our triad back on again, so by default, wind is blowing into your face. So if you're a pilot, the plane's sitting at the end the wrong way and the wind is blowing straight down the wrong way, that's our kind of zero condition for the wind. And we can vary the direction, the azimuth, so that's the horizontal direction, and we can vary the elevation by changing the angle like that. Okay, not too exciting so far, but let's have a go at visualizing a bit of space with some wind in. So if we turn on our first visualization tool, which is our flow field arrows, once again with gizmos on, you should see a white box, and this box is set to the scale of the transform for that object. And whilst our flow field is a scale of 1, we've got a scale of 10 for our flow field arrows. And we've got 3 by 3 by 3. So what it means now, we've got a grid of 3 by 3 by 3 arrows that will appear in that world. Okay, and one thing we're going to be doing quite often is changing the speed of the flow and so on whilst changing the properties of the visualization. So this is a little trick you may or may not know, but if you click on the 3 dots there, you can do add tab, and we're going to add another inspector tab. And let's drag that down. You put it wherever you like, kind of convenient. I'm going to put it down there. And we want to link it to the flow field, so it's on flow field, and then we're going to hit the little lock icon there. And that means that we've always got the controls for our flow field there, and we can do other stuff here and vary the visualization. Okay, let's give this a play, see what it does. So I'm in scene mode again. I'm not in game mode, scene mode, and we can see we've got some arrows there. Pull it down a little bit. And we've got a little bit of elevation on. Tell you what, let's take that off and take that off. So that's going to wind straight in Aeroman's face. But now if we vary it, we can vary the direction of the wind horizontally, and we can vary the wind up and down that way. And we can vary the strength and so on. There's various controls within the arrows themselves, so you can control how sensitive they are on the arrows. So you can control how sensitive they are by the scaling of them there. So that's not varying the wind speed, that's the sensitivity of the arrow. If you want to explore, you can put in so that there's a transparency option, so the further away you get from an item of object, they fade away. That's kind of useful if you've got a big scene. So this is a flow field with no boundaries on it, so it's a global flow field, so this velocity acts globally in the world, but our visualization box is set by these boundaries. Okay, that's great. Next up, let's have a go at putting a streak line in. So I'm going to stop that, and if we enable the streak line and play, not too exciting, but we can see what's going on there. So when I'm moving around in the scene, I'm hitting the Alt key and using the left-hand mouse button to rotate round. And we've got some smoke coming out at 0, 0, 0 in the world, just going backwards in the wind. Since we've got Aeroman here, let's give him something to do. Let's make him hold the smoke generator. So let's move the smoke generator up to his hand, and then that gives him something useful to do. So if we go to our Streakline object, we need to be on the move tool, and I'm going to look in the X direction, go into ortho mode, and drag that up to where his hand is, go from the front view and drag it across. There we go, it's on his hand. Come out of ortho mode, and I tell you what, I'm going to turn the flow field arrows off for now, so we can just see that. It's coming out an angle. Let's just confirm that everything's working. So it's coming out straight, wind's blowing in his face, but we can vary azimuth and we can vary the angle of the smoke. So if you were holding a stick with a smoky end, this is what would happen on a windy day when the smoke's kind of sort of blowing back. Okay, that's quite cool. But tell you what, let's add in some turbulence to make it a bit more interesting. So if we do the enable turbulence on here, we now get a kind of a wobbly flow field. And the turbulence in aerodynamics objects is done using Perlin noise. So what we're doing is we've just generated a kind of 3D noise map, and by sampling that, that gives the local velocity vector for the wind, and that's how we're generating our turbulence. So it's a fairly inexpensive way of generating interesting flow patterns. Most of these tools have tooltips on them. So turbulence magnitude is fairly self-explanatory, so we can make more turbulence, so make the amplitude bigger. But these two parameters down here are what control the kind of character of it. So what I'm going to do is if I turn the turbulence timescale to 0, that means it's kind of fixed in time. So now we get this thing where the turbulence is kind of doesn't change with time, but it does change with space. And then this length scale, this increases the frequency and space of how the turbulence changes. So if I make that larger, it's more wobbly in space of how the flow goes, and if I make it smaller, it's kind of smoother in space. And then if I increase the time scale here, now it's varying slowly in time, so it's kind of wobbling slowly as time varies. But if I increase the time scale here, so increasing the frequency of which turbulence is varying, I can make it increasingly bobbly. And using those two simple controls, you can generate different kind of characteristics of flow, whether it's kind of smoothly varying or jaggedy flow or whatever. So that allows you to kind of build up a picture of how the flow is moving in your scene. Okay, that was Streaklines. So what we're going to now do is look at visualizing the whole volume of flow with lines. And what we're going to do here is use path lines. So a streak line is somebody with a kind of smoke wand releasing smoke. Think of smoke from a flare or something coming out into the world. Path line is slightly different. So this is the path of where a particle has been. And the equivalent here is if you've got a bonfire and someone's chucked a log on it and you get a whole lot of sparks coming out. If you take kind of a long exposure or even a short exposure picture, you get these paths where the sparks have been in the world above the fire. So a path line is where a particle has been. And these are more economical to compute because you just need one particle and you just leave in the world where it's been. Whereas for a streak line, that streak line is made up of many hundreds or thousands of particles, each of which is responding to what the flow is doing. So path lines are a kind of cheap way of visualizing quite a large volume of space. Okay, let's turn these on, see what we get. Yeah, we've got a kind of star field effect. These are just sort of streaks going through the flow in a straight line. And we can vary azimuth elevation as before. You'll notice these lines cross over each other. When you're controlling the flow field, you're controlling where the particle's going. You're not controlling where it went. So where the particle has gone, those things stay put. But as you're moving this, obviously you can see you're varying where the particle's going next. Okay, so let's try adding some turbulence to that. It's looking a bit bobbly. What I'm going to do is make it vary more slowly in time, and I'm going to make it vary a little bit slower in space, but I'm going to increase the magnitude of the turbulence. Up here we've got particle size. They're looking a bit skinny, so I'm going to make them a little bit bigger and make them last a little bit longer, let's say 5 seconds. And if we have a spin round here, yeah, we can see some interesting stuff going on. Tell you what, I'm going to turn that to 0, so it's just fixed turbulence in space, so in time. So now we've got some sort of swirly space there, which we've got flow coming through. And the swirls don't vary with time, but obviously the particle velocity changes as it moves through space. And if we increase the turbulence magnitude, say put it up to 15, we start getting some kind of swirly, curly effects there. If we increase the spatial frequency, we can make it a bit more crazy. So there we go. There's the kind of scale of the turbulence is much smaller. And we can also start making it varying with time, so in case it's increasingly crazy. So now we've got turbulence that's varying rapidly in space and time, and just looking, yeah, quite complex. So that's good. So we've got lots of stuff going on there. We can see things going in various different directions. We get some idea of speed by the way the particles are moving, but actually we can do one better than that and actually colour the path lines by speed. So if we go to the particle options, you can pretty much do anything you like with particles. And what we're looking for is colour by speed. And if we enable that, and our speed range is going to be, well, it's going to go up to about 15. And let's have the start colour, let's have start blue. And then it's going white as they speed up. Okay, yeah, that's good enough. So you can color with, so if you want to encode the speed of the flow in the visualization, you can do that with color. And what else can we do? Well, let's add in some flow particles. So flow particles, it's a bit like it's the Streakline, but without the trail behind it. So you can just see some little dots moving around. They're rather small. Let's make them bigger. And let's have more particles. So they've been spawned at 200 particles a second. So 100, let's increase it to 200. So I'm going to make them a little bit bigger as well. So angry bees in a box. But as I said, the flow field at the top here actually extends off to infinity. We've just boxed in our flow visualization, and that's because on here we've clicked is bounded. So what happens there is when the particles hit the boundaries, they're destroyed in a graceful way. But if we release the hound, so to speak, they can escape from the boundaries, and that's kind of visualizing the kind of larger flow field. And I can do the same with my particles, let them go when they've escaped. And timescale, it's varying very slowly. I'll make it a bit more exciting, slightly more exciting, so it varies a bit more dynamically in time. And our particles, we didn't put any color on those, did we? Let's quickly put some color on those. So color by speed, and these guys, let's make them go red when they're going fast. So at this end, let's make them going red. Okay, so we can have some indication of speed by the color of those guys. What else? Oh, let's go the whole hog, shall we? So we've got our Streakline before from the Aeroman smoke thing. Let's make that much bigger. It's coming out. There it is. And we just give it a permanent color. Let's make it orange. There we go, we've got some sort of crazy flow happening, and of course we can vary our turbulence as much as we like. If we take it out, it all becomes rather dull and straightforwards. Add in our turbulence, off it goes. And yeah, since we're here to have fun as well as work, if you do Control 9 and then in the environment, and you get rid of the skybox. Yeah. Not in the business of producing eye candy, but no AI at all used in the development of this video. But there we go. There's us visualizing a turbulent field using the visualization tools and aerodynamic objects. So we've got our path line here, our Streakline coming from the Aeroman holding it. We've got the path line, which is looking pretty kind of blue at the moment. And then we've got particles there. Oh, and we forgot the flow field arrows. Okay, they're looking too big, so let's scale them down a little bit. There we go, come off there. So that's the kind of full Monty going on of our visualization tools. And okay, bit of overkill there in visualization, but the point is you can't see wind, so you have to use visualization tools to understand what wind is doing. And some of that is for a developer trying to debug stuff when you've got flow, trying to work out what the flow is doing. And some of it may be for a user or a player actually trying to understand what the environment's doing. The cues from visualizing flow are helpful to give information about what the world is doing. Okay, I'm going to stop that. It's all going to disappear because we did it in play mode. Back to the layer man again. And to finish, I did say we were going to do some writing in Smoke. I said yes to do this when I was little. Let's do that. So we can do some writing. So we're going to need the Streakline. And we're going to look at it. Let's look at it from the X direction in ortho mode. Turbulence is off. Get rid of that. And let's do a bit of writing. So on our Streakline, so we can just pick it up and move it. So we can do some writing. So hello world. Okay, it's drifting off downwards. Don't like that very much. I'm going to set that back to 0 again, and I am going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm going to make it last a bit longer. So there we go. We're doing some squiggly writing. It's going down in the wind. Let's turn our turbulence on. Off it's going, heading down the wind. So that's sideways view, but it's kind of fun if we look at it end on. And if you've ever seen Arrival, what the aliens do in their writing kind of reminds me of this. You're doing sort of squiggly stuff, and the turbulence is kind of varying what's going on. So we do our writing over here. Pretty unreadable, but like the alien writing. But there you go. We've done some writing in Smoke in a turbulent flow field. So just to summarize what we did then, so we added a flow field prefab, and it had started off with a uniform flow, and we can control the speed and direction. We can then also add turbulence, so we can control the magnitude of the turbulence, how quickly it varies in space, how quickly it varies in time. And then we looked at a whole lot of visualization tools. So the flow field arrows, let's get these all back up. So these are great for visualizing stuff in space. We've got our streak lines, which is our smoky stick generating some smoke. We've got path lines, which is our kind of sparks coming off the bonfire. And then lastly, we've got particles, which blow in the wind. Great, so that was an introduction to wind in aerodynamic objects. It's the kind of fundamental component to doing anything that flies or moves. You have to understand how the fluid moves and how to see it. And in the next tutorial, what we're going to do now is put an object in there that responds to the wind. So some sort of object that has aerodynamic forces on it. And so in that, we're going to create some wind, but we're going to actually build a tower of blocks. And by modeling the forces on those blocks, we can use wind to start blowing things down. Okay, hopefully see you in the next tutorial.